Hello. And the crowd is thinner. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we are here with the true core of people who really out to seek knowledge. I like it. That's what I'm going to tell myself about this. And hello to everyone here and at home. Thank you, the huge list of people who coordinated this, for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm here to talk about contemporary threats to blockchain, about the near future, opposed to all who talked about the far future. And what's most important to me is to give you a real sense of appreciation to what the challenges truly are. Because I see a lot of people being dismissive about the depths of the threat and the components of the threat, and people often say that there isn't really a problem, or that the problem is much simpler than it really is. So I'm going to talk about solutions too. I don't want to depress you, but I'm going to give a real focus to really understanding why post-quantum migration is so challenging, why you can't say, okay, what's the problem? Let's just all start using Lamport signatures and everything will be fine. So this is my goal here, more than talk about the solutions, but you should listen to the solutions because you guys are developers and we need you. Like, there is a lot of development to be done. It's complicated and it's fascinating and it's very, very nuanced. So if you're looking for a challenge, there's definitely a lot of interesting challenges for developers on this front of Bitcoin at this point. And I'm gonna also mention some specific projects that you can look up, and a lot of them need attention and help. I haven't seen this slide in my life. Okay, I'm just gonna move to the next one. Yeah, I haven't introduced myself though, so I'm gonna let's just pretend none of this happened. Okay, nice to meet you all. My name is Shai, Shai Wyborski, and some people know me as Deshe, and I am a PhD in quantum cryptography. I've done my PhD under the co-advisory of Professor Dorit Aronov and some guy you probably never heard of called Or Satato, is sitting right there. And my two fields of interest within quantum cryptography was the post-quantum migration of blockchain. We researched it quite a lot. We even developed a few useful stuff that I'm going to mention in this talk. And other than that, I also, some of you might know me from my contribution to a project called Caspa, but that's in the past, and that's not what we're going to talk about today. So with that, let's move forward. And so the first thing we need to understand is what is a quantum computer. I'm not going to define what is a quantum computer, but I'm just going to say that a quantum computer is a very mild extension of the standard computational model that we know. Essentially, you can get from standard computation to quantum computation by only adding one operation. This weird operation that takes the bit 0 and turns it to some mishmash of 0 and 1. There is a precise way to do it, to define it. I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to say that if you have a machine that can take this 0 and turn it into this mishmash with the correct values of alpha and beta, then you can do anything else. This is the only missing component for universal quantum computation, in a sense. You also need to be able to apply classical gates coherently to a superposition. It's subtlety, but this is enough. So this thing is possible by quantum phenomena. The reason we say that this thing even exists is because the physicists decide it exists. So we say, okay, so what can we compute with it? Because we're computer scientists. And I have a screen here. The $1 million question is, are quantum computers even more powerful? Now, computationally speaking, they aren't. You can compute the same stuff on a quantum computer and on a classical computer. But when you get to the complexity of things, that's where things get interesting. So complexity-wise, the answer is maybe, it seems so, which is good enough because it means that we can do some stuff with quantum computers that we don't know how to do classically. So let's start with what quantum computers probably cannot do, because a lot of pet peeves here. So they don't break all world encryptions. In fact, there are encryption schemes built specifically to be resilient against quantum computer, but even pre-existing cryptography, not all of it is broken. A lot of symmetric private key cryptography is actually naturally resilient to quantum attacks, and it's only mostly in the realms of public key cryptography that we find that everything breaks and we need to come up with new stuff. And people like to say that they compute all possibilities at once, which we can argue about whether it's true or not. It all depends on what foundation of physics you accept, if you believe in the many worlds interpretation, etc., etc. But practically, if you sample one option or they all happen at once and you just get access to one or whatever, you can't just put in a problem and have free access, random access to all the possible paths of computation. It's much subtler than that. It will probably not be able to solve NP problems or NP hard problems. And we don't know of any problem that it can solve exponentially faster unless you have some oracle or some extension of reality that allows this. And we don't even know of examples where a quantum computer is exponentially faster than the best algorithm that we know. All of the speedups that we know are what we call sub-exponential. They are super polynomial. It's a better speedup than any polynomial, but it's still, for example, factoring a number into primes. We know to do it classically sub-exponentially in like 2 to the square root of n, not 2 to the n, which is much slower, but still super polynomial. So this is the regime where we see quantum algorithms actually give us improvements. And just never go and say that quantum computer does everything faster. In fact, most of the things it will probably do much slower, just because it has a slower clock time. So there is like designated problems that quantum computers seem to excel at particularly. And it seems that a lot of these problems seems to be directly relevant to cryptography, public key cryptography, and the breakage thereof. And so, yeah, I think I said most of these slides. No, actually I haven't. So I said quantum computer can compute certain things much faster. 2 examples I'm going to state is integer factorization and discrete logarithms in abelian groups. Now you don't need to know what discrete logarithms are or what abelian groups are. What you need to know that if you can break, does this thing have a, yeah, it does. Yes, but I need to, yes. If you can, okay, it doesn't really work. If you can do this weird thing with the weird name called discrete logarithms in abelian groups, then you can break ECDSA signatures, and you can break the signature schemes used in Bitcoin, and that's why it's so scary to us. It could also do search. It has this magical algorithm that you can look for an element in the pile of n elements and find it in only a square root of n time. But the real magic happens with protocols. If you take our reality and add just 1 quantum computer, 2 quantum computers, they don't even have to communicate with each other quantumly, then suddenly you can do a lot of weird stuff that you couldn't have done before. And so when you consider protocols, entities talking to each other, hiding information from each other, and these kind of things, then suddenly even very modest quantum capabilities allow you to do stuff that's provably impossible classically. So it's kind of fascinating. Or showed us some examples of this with this voodoo called one-shot signatures. And it's a fascinating world that I'm not going to get into anymore. How far are we from a quantum computer? So again, this is guesswork, but some guesses might be better than others. In 2024, Mosca and Pinay, which is interesting, by the way, Mosca is the same Mosca that wrote a foundational paper in the quantum money world, and now he also helped produce this survey, collect the opinions of a few dozen experts on quantum computation, and in 2024, about more than 50 of them said that there is a higher than half chance that by 2035, we'll see a quantum computer that can break RSA 2048, which is not that high, by the way, in 24 hours. So it's an indication. But that was in 2024. 2026 showed a few unexpected curveballs in terms of pushing forward the technology. I think the two most significant are first the reconfigurable atoms. It's an annoying word to say, by Oratomic, Lubstein et al. Look it up, it's really cool. And there were also a few major algorithmic optimizations that just show how to use the same hardware to do things faster. And my careful guess is that if you will ask the same experts again, they will say that the timeline has compressed since the previous survey. Now, Justin Drake, a name that has been said already on this stage tonight, he said that he thinks there is a 10% chance of cryptocurrencies being compromised before 2030. I don't know if he's overstating it. He definitely has the bias because he comes from the cryptocurrency side. He's supposed to be cautious. But I do think that with all these sources together, these are not odds that anyone should ignore. It moved from a theory to an actual looming threat, in my opinion, and we should start to get prepared. Great slide. Okay, so what are the quantum threats on Bitcoin specifically? Now, a lot of them are relevant to cryptocurrency in general, but not beyond this. So the first threat is that there are a lot of vulnerable coins. What makes a coin vulnerable? The ability to use a quantum computer to steal it without having any privileged information. So, as I said, a quantum computer can do discrete logarithms in a billion groups, whatever it means. It means that if they have your non-hashed public key, does anyone here doesn't know what that means? The distinction between hashed and non-hashed public keys? Okay, great. So if they have your non-hashed public key, they can compute the secret key and then steal all your money. So how does this happen? One way is the P2PK addresses. For those of you who don't know, P2PK means pay to public key. It means that the public key of the signature scheme is written in the clear as your address. And this was the practice for just the several few weeks before they introduced P2PKH and started hashing keys. But during those few weeks, they put a lot of money into wallets that a lot of them hasn't moved since. And as of today, about 1.7 million Bitcoins, or about 8% of the total supply, is in such addresses. Another one is a P2PKH or P2SH, which essentially means just a hashed address, where the address was leaked due to reuse. You told 10 people to pay to the same address, which is a bad practice and you should never do. And then you spent one of the UTXOs. The address is the same for all 10 UTXOs. So once you spent one, then your unhashed public key is written on the blockchain forever, and any quantum adversary can use it to steal the rest of your UTXOs. And so here it's a lot harder to say how much money is involved, because it's also relevant if the public key is known but not on the blockchain, and it's really hard, but the gauge is around 3 million Bitcoins. And the last is Taproot. In Taproot, if you didn't know, the public key is no longer hashed. They use the public key in the clear in Taproot. So now Taproot P2TR UTXOs are again compromised. And Taproot only accounts for about 1.5% of the supply, but to about 15 to 20% of the network activity. As in, it doesn't have a lot of money into it because by the time it was introduced, then the sums that people would use every day became much smaller. But it is responsible to a lot of the volume and still to a nice cut of the pie. So the conclusion is that at the very least, 20% of Bitcoin supply is compromised and could be, in theory, stolen by a quantum computer tomorrow. Second threat is front-running attacks, because people tend to think that since the key is hashed, then you are safe. A quantum computer can't invert a hash, so the thief can't steal your money, which is right until you try to spend it. Because in order to spend the money, you need to broadcast your original non-hashed public key, because without this key, the miners can't even verify that this is that you indeed hold this coin and you're allowed to spend it. So it creates a window of attack from broadcast to confirmation. Once you tell the world what your public key is, you're compromised until you know that the transaction that spends it correctly is on the blockchain and it's deep enough down the blockchain so it would not be reverted. During this time, your money is compromised. And a lot of people want to say, well, a quantum computer is way too slow to do this in 10 minutes, right? So as of today, it's way too slow to do it in 1,000,000 years because it's just not large enough, but technology advances, it's what it does. But other than that, it's not even true that they only have 10 minutes. First, the block interval is only 10 minutes on average. And it's quite noisy, actually. And if you either compute how the distribution should be, it's very easy, it's just an exponential distribution. Or if you look up the data of when blocks actually appear, just look at the timestamps, assume that they are accurate, then you will see that at least once a day, you will see at least a 40-minute gap. You will see larger gaps occasionally. Sometimes you will see smaller gaps. You can't count on these 10 minutes to be something fixed. It's just an average. Another thing is mempool congestion, because transactions nowadays wait to be included. Often they wait to be included a lot longer than the block delay. They can be stuck in the mempool for days because there is congestion. And during this entire time, you're vulnerable. And there are also new attack vectors, an eclipse attack, where you think you communicate with the real network, but you communicate with a fake network. Today, what these attacks accomplish is the ability to double spend. I trick you into paying me, and then I take the sports car I bought from you and drive far away very fast, and by the time the smoke clears, you realize that you've seen fake confirmations and the real blockchain doesn't know that I ever paid you. Fine. But in the quantum realm, suddenly an eclipse attack can give me the time I need to take your key that you tried to pay to me with, compute it back, and just steal all of your money, no matter who you try to pay to. All I need you is to try to pay to someone, not to me, and I can steal your key and steal your money because all of the confirmations that you see are all fake. So these are many reasons why what we have today is not enough. And the third threat, yeah?
Again, the bad blockchain or whatever.
I don't want to get into it more. It's called an eclipse attack. You can look it up. It's a common attack vector. It's essentially, it's not that different from the attacks you see in airports where people use fake loading screens, right? Because all I need to do is to trick you to giving me your public key. That's it. Once I manage to do that, then you're cooked, because I can just use my quantum computer to reverse engineer it. Makes everything so much easier. The third threat is what we call procrastinators. They're also often called laggards. Essentially, the situation is, well, I like to explain like this. Say that all of your money is stored in hashed addresses, and you were kind of tired, so you fell asleep, and you woke up 30 years later, and you realize that now every cell phone is a scalable quantum computer. Is there any way we can help you spend your money securely? Or is it done? Is the money lost and the second you try to spend it, it's gonna get stolen? And so we are going to say that introduce a solution in 3 simple steps. Now, they're not going to be simple, right? It's just, all you have to do is invent safer signatures, implement signatures in Bitcoin, and migrate all your money to these new signatures. It's supposed to be easy, right? It seems very straightforward, and it's not going to be straightforward at all, and it's not even going to be all you have to do. But it's a good starting point for the discussion. Threat number 4, I just want to mention it in passing. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. It's quantum mining, because it's just a pet peeve. I'm only pointing it out because it annoys me. Because people think that since you only have a quadratic speed up in mining, then the difficulty is just going to kind of adjust yourself and everything is going to be back to normal. The truth is that quantum mining is very, very complicated and has a lot of adverse effects. We don't truly even understand the consequences of quantum miners, even if the miners are honest. They're just trying to mine their Bitcoin. They don't even try to be adverse in any way. It's already enough to degrade the security of the network. And this was first noticed by some guy called Ossified, who introduced what's now called aggressive mining. And I don't want to go into this too much, but I just want to say that quantum mining is fascinating, interesting, far from trivial, far from solved, but way further down the line. It requires huge machines, and it requires to compete with clock time, whereas when we usually talk about quantum machines, we just say how many qubits they need, and we think about like how big the computations they can do. And we also talk about, will it take a day, will it take 10 minutes? But when we talk about mining, you actually care about the clock speed very, very much. So it's something that quantum mining has to compete against that all other sources of breakage do not need to. And that's why it's further down the line. But I think it is important to be aware of this in 2 currently relevant scenarios. One is if you're working on much smaller proof-of-work coins, because very, very small proof-of-work coins might be attackable with very small quantum computers, especially if they don't have some of Bitcoin's natural safeguards. I'm not going to get into this anymore. And also, if you have any aspiration to update Bitcoin's difficulty adjustment, again, because the attacks, at least the one attack that I know, it attacks the difficulty adjustment. And so a bad decision there might make everything a lot more vulnerable. But it deserves a talk of its own, so I'm not going to say anything more about it. I just want you to be aware that this is also a thing. And so some more clarifications before we continue. First, I just have to say we don't understand, we'll never understand not just the quantum attacks that exist, but we don't even know what quantum attacks could be. Attackers have infinite creativity and infinite patience, and they could always come up with some curveball you didn't even expect. So it's just something you have to come to terms with, because that's just how it is to be doing cryptography. So stage A was post-quantum signatures, right? So we said that we base the current signature schemes on assumptions which just aren't strong against quantum computers. The hardness is not hard. So we need to come up with new forms of hardness. And so there are a few assumptions of a few problems that are assumed to be hard even for quantum computers. And the two most known names, even though they are not two disparate things, but actually very, very related to each other. One is called learning with errors, which essentially means let's take something structural and add some noise to it And even a little bit of noise is enough to destroy the periodicity and the structure that the quantum computer uses to solve problems. And the lattice-based cryptography, I'm not going to get into it, but it's another way of thinking about how to construct basic problems that should be hard for quantum computers. And this is what we call a post-quantum hardness assumption. And then we use post-quantum hardness assumptions to create post-quantum schemes. A post-quantum scheme is just a scheme that runs on a classical computer. It doesn't require any quantum hardware, but it is still, it does provide security against quantum attackers. So these signatures, they're already out there, they're already standardized. There is an entire timeline for the implementations of such signatures. I'm not gonna go over it right now because I'm tied for a bit pressed for time here, but you should be aware. Maybe I just want to point out the 2023 is when TLS, the TLS protocol introduced post-quantum support, and I'm pointing it out because this is huge, because even if you don't know what TLS is, you use it all day, every day. Pretty much whenever you access a website, you use TLS. Whenever you do HTTPS authentication, you use TLS. Now, it's not always post-quantum. It depends on the settings of the website you work with, but the fact that websites have the possibility means that post-quantum cryptography is becoming more and more available and ubiquitous. So yes, now you can say, wait, these things already exist. So didn't we just finish phase one? Can't we just implement them and be done with it? What's the catch? Well, here are the catches. First catch is simply space. Space, block space, is the most valuable and precious resource on Bitcoin, because space is what you offer people. The service you give them essentially is giving them space to write stuff up that will be there forever. Now, what they're writing is who they're paying their money to, and this whole economy is built over it, but the block space is like the universe, the atoms of this universe that is the blockchain. So it's very, very scarce. And the size of a classical signature that we use today, the relevant metric is the size of the signature and the public key together. There is a good reason for that. So in Bitcoin, it's 97 bytes. And in post-quantum schemes, it's at least 1,600 bytes. So this is not the entire portion of the transaction. The transaction has more data, but if you look at tons of examples and average it, you see that a transaction will be about 10 times larger. And when we're talking about a network that already today can't handle more than 7 transactions per second, it's a problem. Mm-hmm.
Is the sizes of post-quantum signatures with public keys like in the same order of magnitude, or are the public keys maybe getting relevant in the signature?
So it's not really interesting because there are all sorts of tricks that you can do to shift weight from one of them to the other.
Because like there's privacy about setting, you maybe could like some of the public key once somehow.
So this is exactly why I'm looking at them together, because there are all sorts of ways to shift weight from one to another, but together they would always be pretty much the same. Mm? Yes?
Can you use pruning?
Pruning? Pruning what? I'm not sure I follow the question. Okay.
So we say like the Bitcoin solved this partially with the SegWit and Taproot. So do you think they'll develop a similar?
Bitcoin didn't solve this partially. I mean, you still need this data. Okay, so it's part of the virtual. So you separate the witness data from the block data. Okay, fine. but you still have the same throughput. It didn't improve the throughput significantly.
So actually, those schemes do not change the throughput in the
What, you're talking about SegWit?
SegWit, yeah.
No, not really. No, I mean, there was some change because we moved from counting kilobytes to counting mass, right? So it allowed slightly bigger blocks, but it's just a constant improvement, and not even by an order of magnitude. It was less than twice in the best case or something like that. Okay, so the partial solutions are, okay, I think I understood your question now about pruning. So I think you thought that the problem is the storage space on the hard disk because the blockchain is too large. Now, what I meant is how much new data can be added to the blockchain at any second. That's very limited, and it doesn't have anything to do with pruning. Pruning is about whether 3 days from now we are going to keep this information or throw it away. But it's not relevant to how fast the chain can grow in terms of the size. Okay, this has a very small font, which is funny due to the name of the slide. And I think I'm going to keep it anyway because the details are not that important. Just I wanted to point out there is a project called Shrimps, which tries different trade-offs. Essentially, they're using stateful signatures. Stateful signatures means that when you sign, you need to have some additional data that depends on what you've done so far. In this particular case, they just need a counter. Now, when you sign the 5th message, you have to know if the 5th message. If you accidentally signed 2 different 5th messages, then it could compromise the security in a sense that I could forge your signatures. If you accidentally signed 4 messages, then it's almost guaranteed that if I see all of them, I can forge signatures in your names. And it's interesting. It has weird side effects. Like the first signature is like 300 bytes, but every time you use it, the signature grows longer because they essentially used this balanced tree trick, but they used a non-balanced tree on purpose so that you will start with small paths, short paths, and the paths become longer each time. But again, it has the problem that, one, you can't fully recover just from using the seed phrase because you need to know the internal state, you need additional information, and there is a solution for it, but it's painful. It requires you to do an 8,000 bytes transaction to release your money in a stateless way. And of course, there is the problem that if, say, you accidentally use the same seed or 2 wallets, then it might be only a matter of time before you get all of your money stolen. So it has its ups and downs. It's really interesting. Look it up if it appeals to you. But we will agree that it is very partial. And okay, so here I explain everything I said about why statefulness is less than ideal in terms of UX and user security. It's really easy to accidentally not follow the bestest practices, and if you do a small mistake, it could cost you all your money. So it doesn't rule out this solution, but it does mean that you have to justify it quite a lot, and you have to think about, okay, is it worth the smaller signatures? Second catch is that Bitcoin is a fossil. It's ossified. The Bitcoin community is completely averse to updates. And you need a very major update here, right? You need to update, redefine what constitutes a valid transaction. And you might have to even do it both ways because we'll talk about it. But you would also want to make stuff that is pre-quantum not valid anymore. And you know, there are soft forks and there are hard forks. With enough persuasion, you might be able to get people to agree to a soft fork. Hard fork will be harder, and I just remind you that this community has gone to a bloody warfare over op-concat and ordinals. So getting them to agree about what should be the next post-quantum signatures and some other stuff, even more sensitive stuff we'll have to agree on, might prove difficult. The partial solution for now is BIP 360. BIP, in case you don't know, stands for Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. Anyone who thinks they have an idea on how Bitcoin can be better writes eBIP. And BIP 360 is a soft fork. I wrote new type of address P2TR, it's wrong, okay? P2TR exists today, it's just Taproot. It should be, I think, P2MTR, right? Merkle tree root, I don't remember. I botched the name of the type of address. But the thing is that it allows paying today with signatures that will be added later. So it kind of paves the way for implementing new signatures. Because if you implement signatures later, then you just need to have added the verification to the nodes, and with this soft fork, the consensus could already support this. But the drawback is that if you use it today, then your money is kind of stuck until someone implements the signature that you assumed. So I wouldn't say it's even usable today because, again, nobody wants to risk a dime on Bitcoin's community converging on something. So it's better to just wait with it. But when we get there, BIP 360 could be a very nice roadmap to actually introducing these new schemes. So some more catches. These are they're not minor, but there are so many of them, we can't talk about all of them. I just want to point out first, post-quantum signatures require much stronger hardware. It's not only that they are larger, but they're also much more difficult to compute. And now, yeah, your laptop can do it in a microsecond, but hardware wallets are deliberately small and weak. They're supposed to be cheap, they're supposed to be accessible, they're supposed to be simple enough so that they could be verified not to have backdoors as thoroughly as possible. And that's why they are weak, simple machines that we can understand and care for and love. And now you're gonna have to replace all of these wallets because they're just not strong enough to handle post-quantum signatures and the demanding tolls of computing them or verifying them. It depends on the scheme. Some schemes, the computing is the hard part, and some schemes verifier, but at least one of them is always a problem. And the second thing is that they're still under development and research, and granted, many very smart people are giving their best efforts to verify from any possible angle that these things are secure, but you can't compete with 40 years of proven, pedigree. Like ECDSA, people have used it for so long, people have tried to break it for so long, you can't, it's really hard to compete with this. And the third thing is that plausibly, arguably, you're only going to get one chance because rallying the entire community to do this migration, and we're gonna talk about why you need the entire community. But if you rally the entire community to a migration and then you realize, okay, we need to do it again, guys, because I did something wrong, it's not gonna happen probably. And so on one hand, you want to be urgent about it, but the other hand, you want to be cautious because you have to do it fast enough, but you can't have a do-over, or probably can. So it's really being between a rock and a hard place, you know? And now we have the third stage, which is migration, which is actually getting all the money that is not quantum safe and making it quantum safe. And the hard truth that people need to come to terms with is that decentralization is sometimes a disadvantage. And in the centralized system, migration requires that all of the users cooperate. Your bank can switch the way you communicate with it to post-quantum without you ever even knowing it. In fact, there is a decent chance it already has. But your Bitcoins, you are the only person in the world that can spend them from their current quantum compromised home to a new quantum safe home. So if we want all of the Bitcoins, to be migrated, we need all of the users to cooperate. And, you know, some people will not, some people are dead, some keys are lost. So it's a real challenge. And there will be traffic jams. You know, I like to imagine the war of the worlds, where everyone are running away from the vicious vampire, and all of the roads around the city just immediately fall into a huge deadlock. So it will be pretty much that, you know, because Bitcoin is a very narrow bridge as it is, and post-quantum signatures are gonna make it narrower, right? We already talked about this. And as of now, Bitcoin has more than 170 million addresses. So even if we migrate one address per second, and I remind you that it's actually gonna be slower, it's gonna take like 5.5 years to transfer all of them, assuming you dedicate 100% of the block space just for the migration. So this is not going to be simple. We need a plan. We need some way to do this in an organized and civilized manner. And so some people like to ask, okay, who even cares if they migrate, right? If you migrate, you migrate. If you don't, you don't. If they don't, it's their problem. If they lost their keys, it's their problem. And it's a valid approach. I mean, some people subscribe to it, but I don't. And let me tell you why. And it's more of a social argument than a technical one, but says that someone manages to loot all of the vulnerable quantum Bitcoin. What do we know? We know that there is someone that holds on to a huge chunk of the supply, like 20%. We know that nobody knows who they are, at least in some scenarios, it's possible. We know that they have no problem stealing other people's money, and we know that they are powerful enough to build a quantum computer. Now, I don't know what about you, but for me, it means that I don't want to add to the value of Bitcoin. The opposite, I want to run away from Bitcoin as fast as possible. So I think we really want to avoid this. And for the good of the entire network, we need to find a solution for this. And it might mean that we will have to burn money. So if you agree, if you're like going full-on anarchist, saying everyone, each man to their own, then okay, and you can skip the next stage. But for me, I think we need to find out how to do a cleanup. So now we are at stage 4 out of 3 stages, which reiterates what I said, that even if we think that we know all that we have to do, we are going to come across some stuff that we had to think about earlier. So how do we clean Bitcoin of loot? So we first need to define what loot is, and I'm going to be very vague here purposefully. Loot is just anything that the attacker can spend in a way that is indistinguishable from the rightful owner. Me, as a miner, both look identically the same to me. So I don't know if they have the secret key because it's their wallet, or they have the secret key because they use the quantum computer. And now the reason I'm defining it this way is because I want to give room to other ways of breaking the symmetry between the adversary and the truthful owner. And if I just said it's when someone knows the secret key, it wouldn't have been enough, because there are actually situations where the attacker knows the secret key, but we still can help. I'll get to them, but this is why I'm being vague, because I want to not to just present a scenario, but the principle of things. And so an example of loot is an unhashed address, a hash address that leaked, and we already talked about it. And we need to decide what we do with the loot, and honestly, I don't find this question too interesting. You either burn it or you recirculate it into rewards. There aren't any other possibilities, really. The real question is, when do we do it? So we need to draw a line in the sand. When do we burn the money? We need to decide on a date. But there is a problem here. The problem is with the word decide, because again, these people are not going to agree on anything ever. I mean, they might, but you can't count on it. You need a contingency. And the contingency that we came up with or more built on is something that's called canaries. Now, the idea of cryptographic canaries is also usually attributed to Justin Drake. There have been similar ideas before it, but I think he coined the term. And cryptographic canaries are just the idea that if you want to keep track of whether some particular scheme is still secure, what you can do is create a special wallet on a blockchain, such as Bitcoin, with a special locking script such that it could only be redeemed by breaking the cryptographic scheme that you care about. Like you and your friend invented a secret substitute alphabet or something. Create a UTXO with like 1,000 shekels that could only be redeemed by breaking your secret cipher. Then once someone is able to break the secret cipher and redeem the 1,000 shekels, it would act as a beacon, and you would know that they have, and then you would know that you need a new cipher. So this is the idea of quantum canaries, and one of the most important social advantages of quantum canaries is that they also appeal to lawful people. It's legal to take this money. I put it up as a challenge. So people who wouldn't want to steal money are now incentivized to claim a reward for facing an intellectual challenge. I think it appeals to a lot healthier crowds to try and probe into the security of what I'm doing. So I think it's a great social added value. Of the what?
Before that, you presented the problem of deciding when to burn the money.
Yeah, I'm getting to it. Because this was cryptographic canaries. It's a very, very specific, general idea. I'm saying now, okay, maybe I'm gonna try and read your mind and guess your thought process. You're saying, okay, so put a canary for ECDSA on the blockchain, but if someone can kill this canary, they can actually steal from any address, so you haven't done anything about it? Great point. The trick is in the quantum setting to deliberately take a simpler curve that has less bits of security. It's like 100% easier, 100 times easier, which is 99%, but the remaining percent is the one that counts. And so it's easy enough so that the scale of a quantum computer you need to break it is like I don't know, 20% of one you need to actually break ECDSA, but it's still secure enough so classical computers could not break the scheme. So if you manage to choose a curve which has like 110 bits of security as opposed to the 128 bits of security of vanilla ECDSA, then you would need a much smaller quantum computer to steal it, but classical computers still can't do it. So this is the idea of quantum canaries. And I put on this slide just for if you want to take a picture and dive into it later, but this is a very rudimentary game theoretic analysis of two people competing for the loot and the bounty. Okay, wait, I should have stated before, the idea is that you put the canary online and then you hardwire into the protocol a policy such as this money is considered burnt. Yes, this money is considered burnt if the canary was killed more than 10,000 blocks ago or something like that. And so in this analysis, it's kind of confusing. I just wanted to say that the arrows represents how we can switch from one scenario to another by correctly choosing the parameters. And we see that with a correct choice of parameters, we're always in the first or second bunch of scenarios. And without even understanding what they are, what's important about them is that in these scenarios, it always makes sense from a rational Nash equilibrium point of view to take the reward and not wait for the loot. Because in these scenarios, it's just way too likely that by the time your computer is large enough for steal, someone else will claim the reward and you will be left with nothing. So it doesn't kindness or selflessness is just pure game theoretic incentive mechanism design. And the problem of actually choosing the elliptic curve is very hard. You can choose a curve and think that it's perfectly secure, but it has some delicate inner structure that only people like Daniel Bernstein could actually understand. But when they do, they can completely break and steal your reward with a classical laptop. Yesterday, I found out that a paper about how to actually implement these things was published, but I haven't read it yet. So I don't know if it's any good, but it's out there, so I should at least point it out. And now we have the additional stage, the procrastinators. And this is my favorite one because it talks about my work. So again, the same scenario. You've been asleep for 30 years, and now everyone has a quantum computer. And so there is a way to actually securely spend even in this situation, but it requires a modification of the protocol, but it doesn't require a modification of the addresses anyway. The modification allows anyone with a pre-quantum address, which is hashed, and even more addresses to be spent safely. More than that, it actually allows the entire community to be a procrastinator in the sense that even if we haven't implemented post-quantum signatures and quantum computers already arrived, you can still use this thing. I mean, it allows you to be quantum secure while essentially never posting signatures to the blockchain at all, unless you need to prove that someone tried to defraud you. But of course, you know, every trade-off has the offside, and the offside here is that the confirmation times becomes hugely larger, like weeks. And the other one, it does introduce a lot of complexity. It's more of a UX thing, but I think we can do a post-quantum blockchain today that is very efficient, very cheap to use, and doesn't require any post-quantum signatures at all, but it would take a week to pay money on this system. So trade-offs, yeah?
Just a question. Is there any blockchain that implements something like that today?
No, not that I know of, but Bitcoin might implement it very partially. I'm going to get into it in a second. So it starts with an idea by Bonu and Miller, and this is the only interactive part of the slideshow. So if you want to wake up and be prepared to answer questions, this is the fun part. So, oh, wait. It killed all of my animations. Okay, so the answers are going to be on the board. Okay, so the idea is that we commit on the blockchain to a transaction, and then we wait for a prescribed mandatory amount of time, like 100 blocks or 200 blocks, and then we reveal the commitment. And what's the point of that? That our public key is only broadcast to the world when we reveal. And if an attacker manages to use this public key to get our secret key and fake a transaction, they still need to somehow delay our transaction for at least T blocks. Now, if T is 2 or 3, then it doesn't help at all. But if T is 1,000, so right now, not only in order to actually steal this money, you need to somehow prevent the network from posting it for 2 weeks. So the reasonable assumption here is that for reasonably large T's, like you don't need T to be 10 millions, 1,000 should be enough. It's not comfortable, but it's definitely usable, and would make this attack completely infeasible. But now there is a problem. I wanted to ask you what the problem is, but I accidentally left it on the board. The problem is who pays the fees for the commitment in the first place, right? Because a commitment just looks like a bunch of random garbage. The miner is only compensated when we reveal. But what if we never reveal? So this essentially allows anyone to spam the blockchain for free if we do it out of expectation that people will reveal later. We need something better. So, okay, I spoiled everything. The idea is that the user, okay, let's try to do this without the slide. Say we do, so does anyone see any solution for this problem? Yes?
I would say like the simple non-cryptographic solutions that you have to create a new Bitcoin wallet that is like post-quantum secure and commit through it for like another.
Okay, so you're saying essentially use an external method of payment, right? You can either, you know, if you have already a post-quantum address, you can use it to pay.
You would be required to create one and post a commitment to like.
That won't help because the minute you can get a miner to put your commitment on the blockchain without any guarantee that you will ever reveal it, then you won. You already won. It doesn't matter what you committed to or how. Okay, so you're saying you do pay fees from an existing post-quantum address.
Yeah.
Okay, this is one solution. It requires you to have a post-quantum address. You can also pay to the miner on PayPal, right? You can do it like pay them on the side channel. These are all non-solutions, in my opinion. They are just not good enough. And we want something inherent that doesn't require any additional resources. So the idea is that the user, and this is the difficult part, this is the part that uses the zero knowledge, but the user provides along with the commitment a fraud proof. It's a zero knowledge proof that this is indeed a commitment, that I am indeed the owner of the coin, etc., etc. Now,
Wait, but if you can just prove that without like having quantum security issues, why not make a type of transaction?
good, good, because this fraud proof is very, very large. Okay. It's very, very large. So we want the miner only to post it in case that he's being defrauded. If we are in a regular operation, we just, the miner posts the commitment, and then the user reveals, and the miner posts the reveal, and he gets his payday from the fees, and everything is fine. Only if the user tries to cheat, then the miner can post the fraud proof and get all of the money in the UTXO. So what's the problem? So this is the idea. What's the problem with this idea? Yes?
What if it's worth it to post that big proof?
Okay,
so this say you have like 1 billion Bitcoin.
So this is like a limitation. It's a side limitation. Miners would never agree to post a commitment to a transaction for a UTXO that's not large enough to cover the entire cost of posting the huge proof, right? So it does increase the spendability threshold, but that's not what I was aiming for. Okay, say that I give you this commitment, and then by the time, and then I don't reveal it. And then you post a fraud proof, but by the time you have, I already spent this UTXO, I already paid someone else with it. You don't have anywhere to take your compensation from. So what will we do?
Delay?
No, what will we do is that, I'm sorry for just giving the answer, it's just, it's getting late. And but the idea is this, just the miner, when he posts the commitment, just put the transaction ID alongside this commitment, and it becomes locked. And it's only released once the reveal is posted, or it is claimed once the fraud proof is stolen. Okay.
How do you post, like, what's it with the idea that you can't mine that transaction?
So any kind of change that only requires the miners to update is a soft fork, which is fine for us. But the problem is, what prevents a miner from just lying and saying that they have a commitment from this transaction, but the commitment is just a bunch of random crap. So they essentially can use it to censor the UTXOs for free. Just prevent people from spending just because they don't like them. So yeah, we just do the same, also the other way around. Okay, so now I can just put on the slide. The idea is this. The user gives the miner the commitment along with the fraud proof. And then they wait for 100 blocks. And then the user has 100 blocks to post the reveal. If they do post the reveal, then we are concluded and everything is fine. Unless, and if they don't, then the miner has to post the fraud proof. But now the miner also has a limited time of, say, 100 more blocks. And if they fail to post the fraud proof, then we assume that it was actually the miner that was lying and trying to censor a UTXO. And so I forgot to mention it, but in order to do this line of transaction, the miner has to put in a sufficiently large deposit. And if there is no reveal, but the miner did not post a fraud proof, then the deposit goes to the user that they tried to censor. So this is the full protocol, and it has really nice properties, because if you think about it, you don't even have to have anything quantum here. And essentially, you can use it for any address. You don't even have, the user doesn't even have to have the key. You can allow anyone to spend anything and anyone to post a fraud proof in case someone tries to spend their money. So if someone says, my wallet was lost, this is my wallet, I lost the secret key, then you could just let them spend it, but they have to put a deposit and wait for a year. And if during this year someone says, wait, this is my address and I can prove it, and they post a proof, then they get the deposit back. And essentially, it allows us to recover lost wallets. But then you're going to say, okay, but if I know this wallet is lost, then I can steal it, right? But what if I lie to you? I now have an incentive to convince you that my key is lost, so that you can try to steal it so I can take the deposit. So the game theory is really funky and cool, but the point is that there is some merit to a secure way. Like, the security is game theoretic and kind of weird, but it's there. For actually safely recovering wallets where the secret key was completely lost. I think it's terribly cool. And now there is the epilogue. We are forming a roadmap, BIP 361, which is coincidentally the number that comes after 360, by Jameson Lopp et al. And it's essentially, okay, now the animations work. It's a post-quantum migration plan. It proposes a phase A, when we disallow sending 2 vulnerable addresses, phase B, where we disallow sending from vulnerable addresses, which is the burning we talk about, and a phase C, which is to be defined. But essentially, a method to allow quantum safe recovery of legacy UTXOs. Now, a lot of this thing sounds familiar, right? So the ideas we've seen can fit into it. BIP 360 is a pathway to actually implementing post-quantum cryptography via soft fork. Shrimps and shrinks are possible candidates, though not the only ones, to the actual signatures we're going to use. Quantum canaries can act as a beacon for when phase P should be activated. And LFC, well, the ideas of LFC was actually part of the inspiration for even stating phase C as a goal. And if you can go and read the discussion in the dev list. I couldn't participate because I'm not a member, but all participated, and a lot of people talked about it, and I realized that our ideas are useful to greatly extend the set of recoverable addresses. And one developer called Roastbeef is actually already working on a partial implementation, and he's doing all sorts of cool stuff from our paper, not the entire protocol because it's way too complicated, but these ideas are starting to show up in future plans. And now there is obviously the sequel nobody asked for. What if I really want to be ready right now? Now, there is something that I can't call by any other name besides Starkworth's trick, because it is what it is. It's by Avihu Levi, and it's very, very cool. And it's not supposed to be like something that people actually use. It's just to make a point that it is possible. So we can do everything quantum safely even today. So it's based on a cool but very convoluted trick, and there is just this one tiny issue with it, that everything is huge and expensive. Creating a transaction requires a lot of processing, essentially solving this internal puzzle, which is similar to how Binohash works, if any of you knows what that is. So computing one transaction will cost you a few $100s if we assume you have the most expensive enterprise-grade GPUs that are available on the market. And each transaction size, well, I simplified it. Spending two such an 8,000 bytes, spending from such an address requires about 2,500 bytes. So if you want to operate exclusively only with these kinds of addresses, then each transaction would be more than 10,000 bytes, which is insane. But if you're very, very rich and very, very worried, the option is there. How does it work? You start with a strange thing called Binohash and applied a thick layer of post-quantum weirdness and voodoo, and it works. And if you don't find this explanation satisfying, you can file a formal complaint. And that's all I have to say today. Thank you for listening. Have a good night. Questions? Yes?
What's going to happen to those coins?
I think they're probably going to get burned. I mean, unless someone claims them, because they're very, very vulnerable, because they're P2PK. So I think they're probably going to get burned. I think this is like the most reasonable outcome. Other questions? Wow, must have been very, very clear. Yes?
The theory that your theory that you presented before, it had you have to go back. Go back to you were talking about the sending the proof, right? Okay. Say you had to. One of the mechanisms on one side is to put up tokens or coins.
So you have to put a deposit.
So it's like staking somewhere.
I wouldn't call it staking, because you don't really gain anything. I mean, not all deposits are staking, right? And so you're not really taking any risk if you know that you're legit. Anyone else? Okay, so I think we're done. Thank you very much.